I never expected my high-powered girlfriend would betray me with her work friend. When I caught him using my name to share her hotel suite, she had the audacity to demand I apologize to him. That night at Boston's finest restaurant, I walked out and never looked back. 6 months later, she reappeared with bruises hidden behind designer sunglasses. Sometimes karma works faster than you'd expect. My name is Robert Blair. I'm 41, and I run one of the most successful law firms in Boston. I spent 15 years building my practice from the ground up, handling corporate litigation for clients who can't afford to lose. My ex-wife, Claire, decided she wanted a different life halfway through our marriage, one that didn't include me or the life we'd built together. The divorce was clean, but painful. No kids, thank God, but plenty of shared history down the drain. After that, I threw myself into work, expanded the firm, brought on new partners, doubled our client list. Dating wasn't even on my radar until I met Rebecca. It was at the annual Tech Industry Gala, one of those black-tie fundraisers where everyone pretends to care about innovation while really just networking. My firm had sponsored a table, and I was making the rounds when I spotted her across the room, Rebecca Collins, the new HR director at Vertex Technologies. She had this confidence that caught my attention immediately, the way she commanded her conversation circle without seeming to try. When we were finally introduced, the connection was instant. Smart, funny, and refreshingly direct. We talked for almost an hour before exchanging numbers. She didn't play games, didn't wait 3 days to respond to texts. I like that about her. Our first few dates were perfect. Dinner at Maison Laurent, weekend hiking in the Berkshires. Rebecca was 36, divorced like me, no kids, and seemed to understand the demands of a high-pressure career. It felt like I'd found someone who finally got it. But then I started hearing about Mark. Mark this, Mark that. At first, just casual mentions of her friend from work who happened to be her deputy in the HR department. I didn't think much of it. People have friends, colleagues they're close to. I'm not the jealous type. Then came the constant texts during our dates. The emergency calls that would pull her away from dinner. When I finally met him at a company event, the way he looked at her made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. This wasn't just a colleague. This was a man with an agenda. I ignored my instincts. That was my first mistake. The first few months with Rebecca were fantastic. We fell into an easy rhythm. Dinners at my place overlooking the Charles River, weekends at a brownstone in Back Bay. For a man who had resigned himself to the solitary life of a workaholic, it felt like coming up for air after being underwater too long. It was around the 3-month mark when I started noticing patterns. Rebecca's phone would light up constantly during our dates. Most of the time, she'd glance at it and continue our conversation. But when certain messages came in, always from the same contact, she'd excuse herself to reply. Always urgent, always necessary. Mark needs my input on the Richardson case, she'd say. Or, there's an issue with a senior developer that Mark's handling. One night at Sorolina, I finally asked the question that had been gnawing at me. Is Mark always this dependent on you outside office hours? Rebecca put down her wine glass and gave me a measured look. He's my deputy. We handle sensitive HR issues that don't always respect the 9 to 5 schedule. I understand work emergencies. I run a law firm, remember? But this seems excessive. Mark's relatively new in his role. He's still learning. I nodded, letting it go. But something didn't add up. Later that week, I dropped by Vertex Technologies to take Rebecca to lunch. As I waited in the lobby, I spotted them through the glass doors of the conference room, Rebecca and Mark, heads close together, laughing. Nothing inappropriate, just the easy intimacy of people who knew each other well. Too well. When she introduced us, Mark's handshake was firm, his smile professional. Robert, the famous lawyer. Rebecca talks about you constantly. But his eyes told a different story, territorial, assessing. This wasn't just professional courtesy. Later, over lunch, I learned they had history. Mark and I worked together in my previous company, Rebecca explained. When the HR position opened at Vertex, I brought him over. So you're his mentor? Something like that. Her tone was casual, but I caught the slight hesitation. That night, I did something I'm not proud of. While Rebecca was in the shower, I glanced at her phone when a message came in. It was from Mark. Miss you. Drinks tomorrow to discuss the Henderson situation. Nothing explicitly crossing the line. Nothing I could reasonably object to. But my legal instincts were firing on all cylinders. There was subtext here I wasn't privy to. When Rebecca returned, I kept my poker face. But I made a mental note to start paying closer attention to Mark Russo and his convenient work emergencies. I spent my career reading people, spotting inconsistencies in testimonies. And something about this situation wasn't adding up. Not at all. Over the next month, I found myself in an increasingly uncomfortable position. Rebecca was everything I wanted in a partner. Intelligent, ambitious, with a sharp wit that kept me on my toes. But Mark's presence in our relationship was becoming impossible to ignore. One Friday evening, I had reserved a private dining room at Mistral to celebrate winning a high-profile case. My team had successfully defended a medical device company against a $50 million lawsuit, the kind of victory that cements a firm's reputation. I wanted to share this moment with Rebecca. I was halfway through a bottle of Bordeaux when she texted, running 30 minutes late. HR emergency came up. An hour passed, then another. The waiter kept refilling my glass with an increasingly sympathetic expression. Finally, Rebecca arrived, 2 hours late, looking flustered. "I'm so sorry, Robert." Mark was handling a termination that went sideways. The employee threatened legal action, and I couldn't leave him to deal with it alone. I took a long sip of wine, processing her words. "You couldn't send a text with an update?" "I did," she said defensively. "One text, Rebecca. 2 hours ago." She reached for my hand. "You know how these situations are. Time got away from me." I pulled my hand back. "Was this termination planned?" "What? Was it scheduled for tonight, specifically during our celebration dinner? Or was it spontaneous?" Rebecca's expression hardened. "It was scheduled, but the complication wasn't. You know what? I'm here now. Let's enjoy what's left of the evening." I let it go, but the moment stayed with me. Something wasn't adding up. The following week, I had my assistant research Mark Russo. Nothing invasive, just public information anyone could find. Harvard MBA, 5 years at Deloitte before joining Rebecca at her previous company. Recently divorced. The last bit caught my attention. The final straw came when I invited Rebecca to my family's annual 4th of July gathering in Cape Cod. My parents had been hosting it for 30 years at their beachfront property, a tradition that brought together extended family and close friends. "I'd love to," Rebecca said. "But can Mark come too? He's going through a rough patch since his divorce, and I hate to leave him alone on the holiday." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "This is a family event, Rebecca. People who've known each other for decades. Mark's practically family to me, Robert. I've known him for years. And I haven't met your parents yet. But you want to bring your work colleague to mine?" Her eyes flashed. "He's not just a colleague. He's my friend, and he's having a hard time." I stood firm. "No, this is our time together. Mark needs to find his own support system." Rebecca grew quiet, her disappointment palpable. "I didn't realize you could be so inflexible." "It's not inflexibility. It's having reasonable boundaries." The conversation ended there, but the tension lingered. That night, I couldn't sleep, replaying the exchange in my mind. I wasn't imagining things. Mark was deliberately inserting himself between us, and Rebecca was allowing it, or worse, encouraging it. I decided it was time for a direct approach. No more dancing around the subject. After 15 years building a successful law practice, I'd learned that timing is everything, in court and in life. So I waited for the right moment to address the Mark situation with Rebecca. That opportunity came during a weekend getaway to Newport. We'd rented a suite at Castle Hill Inn, a historic mansion perched on the Rhode Island coastline. Away from Boston, away from our offices, away from Mark, or so I thought. We were walking along the cliffs after dinner, the Atlantic spreading out beneath us, when Rebecca's phone buzzed. She checked it, frowned, and began typing rapidly. "Let me guess," I said. "Mark has an emergency." Rebecca looked up, surprised at my tone. "He's dealing with a sensitive situation with the CEO. On a Saturday night? When the office is closed? When he knows you're away with me?" She put her phone away. "Robert, what's going on?" I stopped walking, turned to face her directly. The setting sun cast long shadows across the cliffside path. "I think it's time we address the elephant in the room. Your relationship with Mark isn't normal, Rebecca. Not for colleagues. Not even for close friends." She crossed her arms. "Meaning what, exactly?" "Meaning he deliberately creates situations that require your attention when he knows we're together. Meaning he inserts himself into every aspect of your life, our life. Meaning he acts like a jealous boyfriend, not a work subordinate. Rebecca's face flushed. That's ridiculous. Mark relies on my professional guidance. We have a history of working well together. Is that all it is? I asked, holding her gaze steadily. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly. What exactly is your relationship with Mark? Because from where I stand, it looks like he's in love with you, and you're either oblivious or enjoying the attention. The words hung in the air between us. Rebecca's expression morphed from shock to anger. How dare you, she whispered. Mark and I have a professional relationship built on mutual respect. The fact that you would suggest otherwise says more about your insecurities than anything else. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Rebecca, I'm 41 years old. I've seen enough of the world to recognize when a man wants more than friendship. And Mark wants more. You're being ridiculous. Am I? Then why does he text you at all hours? Why does every dinner we get interrupted by some emergency that only you can help with? Why do you want to come to my family's 4th of July celebration? She turned away from me, facing the ocean. I can't control what you think you see. No, but you can control how appropriate your boundaries are. And right now, they're practically non-existent. Rebecca spun around, eyes flashing. So now you're dictating my friendships? Is that where this is going? I'm asking for reasonable boundaries with a man who clearly wants to be more than your friend or colleague. Mark has been there for me through everything, she said, her voice rising. My divorce, my father's death, my career challenges. Where were you for all that? The unfairness of that statement struck me like a physical blow. I wasn't in your life then, Rebecca. But I'm here now, trying to build something with you, while you're letting another man undermine it at every turn. I walked back to our suite alone, leaving Rebecca on the cliff path. Later that night, she returned, and we maintained a frigid politeness for the remainder of the weekend. On the drive back to Boston, she broke the silence. I think we need some space to figure out what we both want. I kept my eyes on the road, knuckles white on the steering wheel. What we both want, or what Mark wants. Her answer was silence. The week following our Newport confrontation was tense. Rebecca and I communicated sparingly. Necessary texts about schedules, brief phone calls that remained coldly professional. I threw myself into work, taking on a complex securities fraud case that demanded 16-hour days. The distance gave me perspective. I missed her. Despite everything, despite Mark, I missed her intelligence, her laugh, her presence in my life. But I wasn't backing down on the boundaries issue. Some principles aren't negotiable. On Thursday, Rebecca called. Can we meet? Tonight. We agreed on neutral territory, a quiet wine bar in Beacon Hill, halfway between our offices. When I arrived, she was already seated in a corner booth, looking tired but composed in a navy silk blouse that matched her eyes. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat across from her. I ordered a scotch, neat. Almost didn't. Rebecca nodded, accepting the honesty. I've been thinking about what you said. About Mark. And maybe, you're not entirely wrong. Coming from Rebecca, this was tantamount to a full confession. She continued, choosing her words carefully. After our argument, I started paying more attention to the timing of his calls and texts, to the way he inserts himself into my schedule. You were right that it's excessive. I took a measured sip of scotch, letting her continue. Yesterday, I told him I need clearer boundaries, that my personal life and professional life need better separation. He didn't take it well. I imagine not, I said, recalling Mark's territorial behavior. Rebecca twisted her wine glass stem. He accused me of changing because of you. Said you were trying to control me. Classic projection. She smiled weakly. That's what I realized. He was describing his own behavior, not yours. Something shifted in that moment, a realignment of understanding between us. Rebecca reached across the table, took my hand. I'm sorry, Robert. I didn't see what was happening. Or maybe I didn't want to see it. I squeezed her hand, relief washing through me. What matters is that you see it now. We spent the rest of the evening reconnecting, the tension of previous weeks dissolving with each hour. When I walked her to her car, she kissed me with an intensity that conveyed everything words couldn't. The next 2 weeks were the best of our relationship. Mark's interruptions decreased dramatically. Rebecca was fully present during our time together. We even made plans for that trip to Barcelona we'd been discussing for months. I should have known it was too good to last. Mark adapted his strategy. Instead of calling during our dates, he scheduled early morning meetings that required Rebecca's presence. He created projects that necessitated late nights at the office. He found ways to make himself indispensable to Vertex's executive team, ensuring Rebecca couldn't sideline him professionally without consequences. Then came the weekend conference in New York. Rebecca and Mark were both attending as representatives of Vertex's HR department. 3 days in the same hotel, attending the same sessions, networking with the same people. It's strictly professional, Rebecca assured me. The boundaries we discussed are firmly in place. I believed her. I really did. But something cold settled in the pit of my stomach as I drove her to the airport that Friday morning. Call it instinct, call it experience. Something wasn't right. My doubts were confirmed when Rebecca returned Sunday night, subdued and distant. Something had changed. Again, the day after Rebecca returned from New York, I invited her to dinner at Minton, Boston's premier fine dining establishment, where reservations were secured months in advance. I'd called in a favor from a client who knew the chef to get us the most private table in the house. Something fundamental had changed in Rebecca since the conference. She was physically present but emotionally distant, checking her phone constantly despite our long-standing no phones at dinner rule. Her laughter seemed forced, her responses delayed, as if she were processing my words through a filter. When our appetizers arrived, I decided to address the elephant in the room. Did something happen in New York with Mark? Rebecca's fork paused halfway to her mouth. What? No. Why would you ask that? Because you've been different since you returned. Distant. She placed her fork down carefully. The conference was stressful. Major policy changes coming down from corporate. I'm processing a lot. I studied her. 15 years of deposition experience kicking in. She was lying. Not about everything, perhaps, but about something significant. Rebecca, I'm going to ask you directly. Is there something between you and Mark? We've been over this, she said, irritation creeping into her tone. He's my colleague and friend. That's all. Then why did the hotel concierge call my office this afternoon to follow up about the cufflinks I supposedly left in your suite? The suite you told me you weren't sharing with anyone. Her face paled. I hadn't planned this confrontation, but when the concierge called, mistaking me for Mark based on Rebecca's description of her partner, a piece of the puzzle fell into place. It wasn't what you think, Rebecca said, her voice barely audible over the restaurant's ambient noise. Then what was it? My tone remained calm, controlled, even as anger churned beneath the surface. We had adjoining rooms. Hotel error. They apologized and offered us an upgrade to a suite with 2 bedrooms. And the cufflinks? The concierge specifically mentioned Mr. Blair's monogrammed cufflinks. Rebecca's composure cracked. Mark borrowed your name. When we checked in. As a joke. A joke, I repeated flatly. He pretended to be me, while sharing a suite with my girlfriend. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Rebecca? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like your friend is deliberately blurring the lines between your professional and personal relationships. And you're letting him. Several diners glanced our way. Rebecca lowered her voice to a harsh whisper. You're making a scene. This is exactly why I didn't tell you. I knew you'd overreact. Overreact? To discovering my girlfriend shared a suite with another man who's clearly interested in her, who pretended to be me. The waiter approached with our main courses. I waved him away. Mark is going through a divorce, Rebecca hissed. The company cut travel expenses. We made a practical decision. Did you sleep with him? Her eyes widened with genuine shock. No. God, Robert. How can you ask me that? Because your friend has been trying to sabotage our relationship from day one. Because he used my name to get into your hotel suite. Because you lied about the arrangement. Rebecca's expression hardened. I think you need to calm down. You're being irrational. Actually, I've never seen things more clearly. I placed my napkin on the table and stood. I care about you, Rebecca, but I won't be part of whatever game Mark is playing, and I won't be with someone who can't set appropriate boundaries. Rebecca grabbed my wrist. Sit down. You're embarrassing me. I gently removed her hand. No, you've embarrassed yourself. And frankly, you owe me an apology for allowing that man to use my name. Her face flushed with anger. I don't owe you anything. Mark was being practical, and you're acting like a jealous teenager. That's when I knew we were done. Not because of the suite, not even because of Mark's obvious ploy, but because of Rebecca's dismissive response to a legitimate breach of trust. Goodbye, Rebecca. I hope Mark is worth it. I walked out of Minton with my dignity intact, leaving behind a relationship that had been compromised long before tonight. I didn't hear from Rebecca for 3 days after I walked out of Minton. No calls, no texts, no emails, just silence. I threw myself into work, staying at the office until midnight, taking my mind off the relationship with case files and depositions. On the 4th day, my assistant buzzed my office intercom. Rebecca Collins is here to see you. I considered refusing, but that wasn't my style. I faced problems head-on. Always had. Send her in. Rebecca entered, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that spoke of armor rather than fashion. Her expression was unreadable. Thank you for seeing me, she said, remaining standing even after I gestured to a chair. What can I do for you, Rebecca? I came to clear the air. She placed her hands on the back of the chair, gripping it tightly. What happened at Minton was unfortunate. Unfortunate, I repeated, letting the inadequacy of the word hang between us. You were right about some things, she continued. The hotel situation was inappropriate. Mark shouldn't have used your name. I leaned back in my chair. And I've spoken with him about professional boundaries. Again, her eyes flashed. Yes, again. These things take time. I stood, walking to the window that overlooked Boston Harbor. What exactly do you want from me, Rebecca? Forgiveness? Reconciliation? Because from where I stand, nothing has fundamentally changed. That's not fair. I've acknowledged the issue. I turned to face her. Acknowledgement isn't action. Mark is still in your life, still crossing boundaries, still undermining our relationship. He's my deputy. I can't just cut him out professionally. No, but you could establish clear lines. You could stop making excuses for his behavior. You could prioritize our relationship. Rebecca's composure slipped. That's what I'm trying to do by being here. Are you? Because it sounds like you're asking me to accept the status quo with a few superficial adjustments. She took a step toward me. What do you want from me, Robert? To fire him? To end a decade-long friendship because you're insecure? And there it was, the fundamental disconnect. She still couldn't see what was happening or refused to acknowledge it. I want you to recognize that Mark is in love with you, that he's actively trying to sabotage our relationship, that his friendship is a cover for deeper feelings that you're either blind to or enjoy too much to confront. Rebecca's face flushed. That's absurd, is it? Ask yourself why a friend would impersonate your boyfriend to share your hotel suite. Why he needs constant access to you. Why he can't respect the boundaries of your relationship. You're twisting things. I moved closer, my voice quiet but firm. No, Rebecca. For once, I'm seeing things exactly as they are. And until you do too, we have nothing more to discuss. She stared at me for a long moment, conflict visible in her eyes. Then something hardened in her expression. Fine, if that's how you feel. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, Mark said you'd react this way, that you'd never understand our friendship. I laughed, a short, humorless sound. And there it is. You've already discussed this with him. He's already shaped your response. She left without another word, the door clicking softly behind her. The weeks following my final conversation with Rebecca were surprisingly peaceful. I'd expected more conflict, more drama, the kind of emotional fallout that had characterized my divorce. Instead, there was simply clarity. I restructured my schedule, focusing on the firm and myself. Morning workouts at my building's gym, dinner with old friends I'd neglected, a weekend fishing trip to Maine with my brother. Life continued, as it always does. Rebecca texted once, I miss you. Can we talk? I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. 3 weeks after our breakup, I ran into my colleague Sandra Whitman at a legal conference downtown. We'd worked together on several cases, but never crossed the professional line. Over drinks at the hotel bar, conversation flowed easily. Law, politics, literature. No drama, no baggage, just engaging conversation between two adults. You seem different, Robert, she observed. More relaxed. I considered this. I've simplified some things in my personal life. The HR director. Office gossip travels fast. I smiled. Occupational hazard of dating within professional circles. Her loss, Sandra said simply, then changed the subject. Later that evening, walking Sandra to her car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. genuine ease in another person's company. When she suggested dinner the following week, I accepted without hesitation. I was organizing files in my office the next morning when my phone rang. An unknown number. Robert Blair. Mr. Blair. This is Mark Russo. My blood ran cold. What do you want, Mark? To clear the air. His voice had the practiced smoothness of someone who'd rehearsed their speech. There's been a misunderstanding about my relationship with Rebecca. There's no misunderstanding. We're done. All of us. That's just it. He continued, undeterred. Rebecca and I have always been friends. Nothing more. You misinterpreted. I'm going to stop you right there. I said, my voice calm but steely. I don't need explanations or justifications. What I need is for both of you to respect that our relationship is over. Rebecca's upset. She thinks you overreacted. What Rebecca thinks is no longer my concern. I kept my tone measured, professional. Now, unless you have actual business with my firm, this conversation is over. You're making a mistake, Mark said, a note of desperation creeping into his voice. She cares about you. Not enough to set appropriate boundaries. Not enough to respect my concerns. And certainly not enough to keep you from calling me to plead her case. Silence stretched between us. I'll tell her you wouldn't listen, Mark finally said. Tell her whatever you want. I've moved on. I hung up, feeling a strange sense of finality. Whatever game Mark and Rebecca were playing, I was no longer a participant. That evening, as I prepared for dinner with Sandra, I received a final text from Rebecca. Mark told me about your conversation. I thought you were bigger than this. I deleted the message without responding. Some people never see the patterns in their own behavior, but I had seen enough for both of us. 6 months passed. My relationship with Sandra evolved naturally. Dinners became weekends. Weekends became routine. No drama, no power struggles, just mutual respect and enjoyment of each other's company. She understood my work commitments because she shared them. We fit. I rarely thought about Rebecca anymore. Boston is small in professional circles, but large enough to avoid uncomfortable encounters if you're careful. I heard through mutual connections that Vertex Technologies had undergone restructuring. Beyond that, nothing. Until the charity gala. The annual Legal Aid Foundation fundraiser was mandatory for partners at my firm. I arrived with Sandra, making the usual rounds, when I spotted Rebecca across the ballroom. She wasn't alone. Mark stood beside her, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. They were engaged in conversation with Vertex's CEO. Ex-girlfriend? Sandra asked, following my gaze. Ancient history, I replied, turning my attention back to her. Later, at the bar, Rebecca approached. She looked thinner, her smile tight as she greeted me. Robert, you look well. Thank you. You too. The polite lies of former lovers. An awkward silence stretched between us until she spoke again. I suppose you've heard. About Mark and me. I haven't. We're together now. Officially. She twisted her champagne flute nervously. The company approved it last month. I nodded, unsurprised. Congratulations. Rebecca studied my face, looking for something, jealousy, perhaps, or regret. Finding neither, she continued. You were right. About him. About his feelings. I just couldn't see it then. Or didn't want to. I suggested mildly. Maybe, she admitted. The thing is, now that we're together, it's different. She glanced across the room to where Mark watched us, his expression tense. He's not who I thought he was. I felt a flash of vindication, quickly replaced by pity. Few people are. Rebecca leaned closer. He's controlling, jealous of every male colleague. Checks my phone. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I've made a terrible mistake. Before I could respond, Mark appeared at her side, his arms snaking around her waist. Blair, he acknowledged coldly. Russo, I returned evenly. We should circulate, he told Rebecca, voice brooking no argument. As he led her away, Rebecca glanced back, eyes filled with regret. Sandra rejoined me, hand warm against mine. Everything okay? I watched Rebecca and Mark disappear into the crowd, her shoulders tense, his grip tight. The bullet I dodged. Everything's perfect, I said, meaning it. 1 year to the day after I walked out of Minton, I asked Sandra to marry me. We were in my lake house in Vermont, watching the sunset from the dock. No elaborate production, no audience, just us, and the question that felt inevitable. Took you long enough, she said, eyes bright with tears and laughter. We planned a small ceremony for the following spring. No rush, no pressure, just the steady certainty of two people who knew what they wanted. 3 weeks before our wedding, Rebecca called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Robert, it's me." Her voice sounded strained, tense. "I need legal advice. I don't practice family law, Rebecca." "It's not." She paused. "I'm leaving Mark. Things have gotten difficult." I felt a complex mixture of emotions: vindication, concern, detachment. There are excellent attorneys at Hamilton and Reed who specialize in restraining orders. Her sharp intake of breath told me I'd guessed correctly. "How did you?" "Experience. Observation. The signs were always there, Rebecca." Silence stretched between us. "Then, I should have listened to you." "Yes," I agreed, not unkindly. "You should have." "I made a terrible mistake," she whispered. "With Mark. With us. I keep thinking about what might have been if." "Don't," I interrupted gently. "That path leads nowhere good." After providing names of attorneys who could help her, I wished her well and ended the call. I felt no satisfaction in being right, only relief that I'd trusted my instincts when they mattered most. The day of my wedding arrived bright and clear. Surrounded by close friends and family at a vineyard in the Berkshires, I watched Sandra walk toward me, radiant in ivory silk. During the reception, my best friend David raised his glass. "To Robert and Sandra, proof that when you know your worth, the right person values it." Later, dancing with my new wife under string lights and stars, I reflected on the journey. The painful ending with Rebecca had led to this beginning with Sandra, a relationship built on mutual respect, clear boundaries, and genuine partnership. "Happy?" Sandra asked, reading my expression. "Beyond measure," I replied, holding her closer. Sometimes losing what you thought you wanted leads you directly to what you actually need. Sometimes walking away is the strongest move you can make. And sometimes life comes full circle in ways you never expected but always deserved.